now to continue my 2010 Big 12 team-by-team preview. Today it's all about the CU Buffaloes, as in Colorado University. But the CU might as well stand for see you later, because they're going to be leaving to go to the Pac-10 pretty soon. It's not the same sentiments as Nebraska leaving the Big 12 to go to the Big 10. I think a lot of people, when they found out that Nebraska was leaving, was, man, that's a hefty loss for the Big 12 conference. All that tradition, it's going to the Big 10 now. When people found out Colorado was leaving by and large, their thoughts were, don't let the door hit you on the way out. Now, don't get me wrong, Colorado's had some nice teams in the past. They won a share of the 1990 National Championship, and they won the Big 12 Championship back in 2001, their only Big 12 title. But the last few years, it's been pretty much a Rocky Mountain low for the folks in Boulder, because the last 4 years they've won a grand total of 16 games. How are you supposed to establish a terrific program if you're only averaging 4 wins a season? And last year was one of the worst years I can remember Colorado ever having, going 3-9. And to my amazement, Dan Hawkins still has his job. Must be a pretty big contract he has. But you can rest assured this year, if Colorado cannot improve, and furthermore, if they can't get to a bowl game, you have the feeling that Dan Hawkins is going to be selling his house pretty soon, because he won't be around. So what's been the problem with Colorado? What was their big problem last year? Well, unfortunately, I don't have an hour-long show, so I can't get into all the specifics, so we'll give you the Cliff Notes version since our show is abbreviated. Bottom line is that Colorado's offensive line last year was bad, both run blocking and especially protecting the quarterback. They gave up a whopping 46 sacks in 2009. It didn't matter if Cody Hawkins, the coach's son, or if Tyler Hanson was the QB. Both were in for long days because the protection wasn't there. For Colorado, they at least have one offensive lineman that the media at least thinks is worthy of all Big 12, and that's Nate Solder, added to the all Big 12 first team as an offensive lineman. 6'9", 300 pounds. He is a pretty good run blocker, even though the rest of his offensive lineman teammates can't follow suit. Pass protection, not one of Solder's strongest suits, but he is one heck of a run blocker, and he will need to be if Rodney Stewart, the running back, is going to have a nice season. Last year, Stewart, despite the fact that the Buffaloes as a team was one of the worst in the country in rush offense, did have about 900 yards. Unfortunately, he was all that Colorado had as far as running the ball. Stewart, you might remember, was a running back last year that emerged to the top. Things did not go very well for Colorado as far as who they thought was going to be the main man running the ball, as Darrell Scott, who was one of the top high school running backs in the country, might have been #1 as a matter of fact, shocked a lot of people by picking Colorado a few years ago. But unfortunately, Scott did not have terrific attitude or work ethic, and Stewart actually ended up being the better back. So Rodney Stewart doesn't have to look over his shoulder anymore. It's his position. Hopefully, in his case, his lineman can give him enough of a crease to make things happen. But again, rushing offense was a struggle for the Buffaloes. They were 113th out of 120 teams in Division I football a year ago in rush offense. I mentioned the quarterbacks. Tyler Hanson, who is probably the better of the two quarterbacks. He may not have the arm of Cody Hawkins, but he seems to add more of the intangibles, including the ability to get out of the pocket. He's more mobile and can do more on his feet as far as improvising goes. So for right now, this job is Tyler Hanson's to lose, but you can bet that Cody Hawkins will be waiting if there's trouble offensively, and that could happen. One area that doesn't look like a troublesome spot for Colorado will be the receivers, and we're talking about Scotty McKnight, who is one terrific talent. And even more good news for the Buffaloes, he'll be complemented with Tony Clemens, and Clemens has already earned Big 12 accolades before he's even stepped onto a Big 12 field. That's because he has been named by the media as the Big 12's newcomer of the year. He's a transfer from Michigan. Things didn't work out with Rich Rodriguez, so now he joins the Buffaloes, and already at least one major publication thinks that this is the best receiving duo in the Big 12. We'll have to wait and see if that's the case. Now looking at Colorado's defense, I think the strengths for the Buffaloes is going to be in the secondary. where they have a ton of speed. And one guy that they're excited to have back is Jimmy Smith. Jimmy Smith playing the corner, and I think this guy's ability to play in the NFL has 4.3 speed and can hit. So he'll be fun to watch this season. At a safety position is going to be Anthony Perkins. They'll have him back there in the secondary. And looking at the defensive line position, they returned 3 starters, including Marcus Harrod, who will be expected to be the anchor of that D-line. He had 6 sacks a year ago. Unfortunately, though, Colorado in the linebacker position only returns 1 LB. So that's an area to really focus on. The Buffaloes last year, in their defense, spent a lot of time on the field just because the offense gave the ball away a bunch and punted so much that the defenses seemed like could never get off the field. So we don't really realize their full potential. But they also have to help their own cause by forcing turnovers. They didn't do a good job of that last season. Now let's take a look at some FYIs for the Colorado Buffaloes. And of course, we cannot escape it. It's going to have to be pass protection. We mentioned it earlier. The Buffaloes gave up about 4 sacks a game in 2009. You've got a good running back. You have 2 really good receivers. And you have experience at quarterback. It won't mean jack if the quarterback doesn't get time to throw. So pass protection, hopefully if you're a Buffalo fan, they spent spring practice and are spending a lot of time during these 2-day workouts focusing on giving the quarterbacks more time to throw. If that doesn't happen, it's going to be 2009 all over again. Number 2 kind of leads to my second point, talking about the play of the receivers, and these guys have an opportunity to be special in the Big 12. Having Clemens transfer from Michigan to Colorado might be the one thing that can get that passing game really beefed up. McKnight is a terrific receiver, but with the addition of Clemens, defenses now know that they can't just focus on McKnight. So that could be something really good for the Buffaloes, McKnight as well as Clemens. And then number 3, forcing something to happen, and that is the takeaway department, which the Buffaloes were very inopportune in this department. You have a speedy secondary, an experienced secondary for the Buffs. This is their opportunity to improve in this department. Got a year of experience behind you, and I mentioned the speed. We'll see if Colorado can force turnovers and help out the offense. Looking ahead to the 2010 schedule for the Buffaloes, you cannot accuse Colorado of ducking competition because their non-conference schedule has plenty of it, including a September 4th showdown against Colorado State. That matchup in Denver last year, the Rams edged out the Buffaloes. I have this game going either or. September 11th, they'll take on a future Pac-10 opponent as they'll travel to Berkeley to play the Cal Golden Bears. Cal's going to win this one. They're a better team. September 18th is a showdown against Hawaii. Thankfully for Colorado, it's at home. Hawaii is in a rebuilding process. I think Colorado will win this game. Even more good news for the Buffaloes. They'll get 2 weeks to get ready for their next home game. But the bad news is it's against Georgia, a pretty good SEC team. Georgia will win this one, even though the game's at Boulder. And then we talk about the Big 12 and the schedule, not kind at all for the Buffaloes. They'll play at Missouri, at Oklahoma, and to close out the year against Nebraska the day after Thanksgiving. Loss right there. Just those 3 games alone will be defeats for Colorado. October the 16th, good news, they'll host Robert Griffin and the Baylor Bears. Should be a victory for Colorado. It better be a victory for them. October the 23rd, they'll host Texas Tech. Historically, at least recent history, they fared very well against the Red Raiders, defeating Tech in both 2006 and 2007. This game will go either or. Colorado will have home field advantage in this one. Then November 6th, they'll take on first-year head coach Turner Gill of the Kansas Jayhawks, but the game is in Lawrence, either or in that one. And November 13th at home against Iowa State, I'll give Colorado the benefit of the doubt playing at home against an Iowa State team that will be in a bit of a rebuilding stage. November 20th, they'll take on Kansas State. This one is either or. Colorado will be at home in that one. And finally, it's time to break down best case and worst case scenarios for the Buffaloes. Now, the worst case scenario is going to be 2009 repeated, as they would go 3-9 if they cannot win those games that they're either or's in, and if they lose all the games they're expected to lose. And that would lead to Dan Hawkins' dismissal. If this doesn't, if going 3-9 back-to-back seasons doesn't lead to your departure, I don't know what will. The best case scenario, though, is that Colorado goes bowl eligible by winning those swing games and finishing with the record of 7-5. You would take that if you're a Buffaloes fan. However, I have the Buffaloes finishing with the record of 4-8 and finishing 5th in the Big 12 North Division. Just simply too many questions to answer for Colorado. And I think that when Colorado goes to the Pac-10, whether it's 2011 or 2012, Dan Hawkins will not be on the Buffalo sideline.